Thank you for everybody who's joining us with this conversation with Max Resnick of the Documenters. And as a part of Sunshine Week, we are highlighting our past award winners from the 2023 honorees. My name is Jody Raves Spotted Bear. I'm chair of the SPJ Freedom of Information Committee, and I'm also the director and founder of the Indigenous Media Freedom Alliance. We publish on buffalosfire.com. And again, Max, welcome and happy to have you with us today. Just as a little bit of background, in 2023, the SPJ FOIA Committee and the SPJ Board of Directors had a really excellent slate of applicants, candidates for the Sunshine Award. And it was really a tough decision for everybody, but there were some really super standouts, and the 2023 honorees were the Maine Monitor, City Bureau, which Max is here to represent today, Military Times, the Marshall Project, the Texas Tribune, and ProPublica. And what makes City Bureau stand out as somebody that we would really like to highlight is, whereas our past winners, those stories have come and gone, but in the context of City Bureau, it's a continual work in progress, and Max can explain to us what City Bureau does. So for the Sunshine Award, not everybody has to submit a story. It can really, this is a tip of the hat to people that are really working on important contributions in the area of open government. And just a reminder that deadline for nominations for the 2024 Sunshine Awards is April 17th. So we really encourage people to share this video when we are done and share it with your network so we can continue to highlight the best of the best in open government throughout the United States. So Max, tell us what is happening with City Bureau and the Documenters. I know that there's continual expansion on, but just maybe a year ago, the Documenters were in 8 cities. So not everybody is familiar or knows about the Documenters. So what can you tell us about the work that you're doing?
Thanks so much, Jody and SPJ, for having me here. I'm Max, the Director of Network Services for the Documenters Network at City Bureau, calling in today from sunny and beautiful New York City. I'm here today to talk about how we're building a national people-powered civic journalism network, the curriculum and training that we've developed for documenters, and the ways that documenters locally, nationally can connect to a broader civic infrastructure within their communities. So it's me. Hello. Nice to be here with all of you. Let me start. Just think for a second about how many of you in the audience have gone to a public meeting this year? And how many of you feel like there's adequate local reporting where you live for the information that you need? Yeah. How many would feel like those public meetings are a welcoming, friendly space that's easy for residents to know what's going on? So what we're doing with the Documenters Network is based around this idea that journalism skills are civic skills. Every day in communities across the country, local government bodies are holding public meetings, and the vast majority of them have no media coverage and produce limited, if any, record. No meeting minutes, no highlight reels, no information for people who live in those communities but need to know what's going on in those spaces. So we see this as a chief cause for disengagement, and also an opportunity to rebuild some of the infrastructure of civic life. So City Bureau, which is the home base for Documenters, was founded in a response to the way that media has worked historically in Chicago, which is where we started. Singular narratives that marginalize communities in the south and west sides of the city, media that's exclusive, that's extractive. And what we're trying to do is reimagine the way that residents, community members interact with journalism and vice versa to create more representative and collaborative local media. So we're working towards a future in which all people are equipped with the tools and knowledge to affect change in their communities. And there are three main ways that we do this: through our public newsroom series, our civic reporting fellowship, and documenters. So public newsrooms, or PNs for short, are spaces for dialogue and learning between community members, grassroots leaders, thinkers, and journalists. Our civic reporting program provides fellowship opportunities for emerging reporters and residency for journalists committed to community-based journalism. And documenters gets people to learn skills typically reserved for journalists through trainings and practice, while also creating a public record of what our local government is doing at all of those public meetings. So this is City Bureau's theory of change in a tiny nutshell. We're not just working to inform people. We're not just trying to engage people. We are equipping residents to generate power in their communities. And we say equip because we want to move away from this idea that sharing and generating information is solely the role of credentialed journalists, or that the work stops when people have been engaged. And in this past year, residents in now soon to be 19 cities and communities have spent thousands of hours of civic work, going to more than 5,000 public meetings across the country, which is translated to hundreds of thousands of dollars paid out directly to documenters. So documenters are residents, they're community members, civic actors, creators and collaborators representing a broad base of intergenerational diverse communities. And we're working together with documenters and with all of our partners across the country to democratize news and information at the local level. So what does it actually mean, though? Documenters is a reporting database, a collection of individual produced, community-driven reporting on local government meetings. And it's designed to be a side hustle, a civic side hustle. It's a space for people to take on some paid assignments, to develop some new skills, and contribute to the news gathering process in their communities. Speaking of community, people coming together to build that civic knowledge and power is core to the way that documenters learn. People take assignments, they go to public meetings, take notes, but the real learning happens as part of the learning community locally. And all of this is contributing to published content. So news products featuring original content from documenters and our news partners across the country. Now, we get a question a lot. So what happens to all of that reporting that documenters produce? We have a website, documenters.org, that makes it easy to discover the latest local government reporting from hundreds of documenters every day from across the network, allowing you as a reporter to search through trends, identify key boards or commissions that are operating in your community or in others that might be dealing with similar challenges. And each of our partners locally produces meeting briefs, explainers, and deeper dive investigative reporting that starts with the work that documenters do at these local public meetings. All of our sites are publishing newsletters for audiences of newsrooms, organizers, educators, government employees, documenters, and members of the public. And we develop projects like the Open Government Report Card, which apply an accountability framework and a grade to more than 100 government agencies in Chicago. And we're creating public tools like voter guides, where documenters have the opportunity to practice and implement new skills and contribute to the information that residents have in their communities. And we also have fun. So public meetings can be kind of tense, they can be kind of dry, and our teams are working to make that experience engaging, fun, accessible to residents. In Cleveland, for the last couple of years, when dealing with budget season, they've run an annual budget bingo. And one of the squares from last year had City Councilor Brian Casey wearing a tie that looked like a Prince album cover. And local governments get involved in this now too, especially as they've gotten to know documenters better. And here's Brian Casey, City Councilor, doing his best to fulfill part of the budget bingo with a beautiful pink and purple paisley tie in Prince style. So all of documenters' work is intentionally cooperative and collaborative. Creative Commons makes it so that any work that documenters produce can be shared and remixed, applied and amplified by other local news partners. And the idea is that rather than feeding a competitive local news ecosystem, documenters connects ties between organizations that historically might not have worked together by producing information that's beneficial to all. It transcends those silos and competition. And then in each of our communities, we categorize the impact that we measure around 12 outcomes that fall into categories like civic knowledge, relationship development, information economy skills, and information systems resilience. So alongside clicks or ads sold or legislation passed, we're painting a more nuanced picture of the work that City Bureau and our partners have done and where we want to go with it. Increasingly, we've seen documenters step into leadership roles. They take their experience covering meetings and come up with brand new ideas for ways that they and their fellow documenters can gather information, produce news, and produce reporting for their communities. For now 2 years in a row, documenters have ridden the bus in Detroit and gathered information from bus drivers, from commuters, building their own data sets to track how commuting and public transportation functions in the Motor City. And increasingly, documenters are joining freelance networks. Some have gone on to start their own news outlets, and others, I'm getting a call here. Others have gone on to run for local public office or have started working in the offices of local politicians and city council members in their communities as well. So people who might not have known that local government was a space where they could get involved or local journalism was a space for them, and having documenters be that intro to that world of opportunities and career path. Also, we're hearing increasingly from sites that are interested in remixing documenters to look at thematic or topical coverage. In Utah, the Salt Lake Tribune has been training residents and paying residents to attend public meetings involving water across the state. And we have an increasing number of rural sites too, where documenters are going to public meetings across county levels and taking notes and contributing to information that people have in those areas as well. And alongside Buffalo's Fire with Jody here, we're going to be starting to document tribal government meetings in North Dakota, which we have so much to learn about, and I am so excited for. So we are, as of today, at 19 different communities and growing, and we'd love to have more organizations, more communities join the growing network. Thanks so much for having me. And now Jody and I will have a conversation and would love to invite questions from folks who are on the webinar about how Documenters works.
Yep, thank you for that presentation. I learned a lot that I wasn't even aware of quite yet. And as you mentioned, Buffalo's Fire is based here in North Dakota, and we just are happy to announce that we hired made a job offer to our site manager to manage Buffalo's Fire here in Bismarck, North Dakota. And there will be really a lot that we can learn from your organization. And can you just talk a bit, Max, about where did the idea for the documenters germinate? I mean, who had the idea? It's like, let's train civic journalists or community members to go cover meetings. What is the story there?
Yeah. Oh, am I frozen?
Yep, looks like it.
I'm frozen maybe on my computer. Oh boy, here, let me try turning my video off and then back on again. Okay. The origin of documenters. So this is not a new idea, right? People for years and years have had community contributors. The League of Women Voters has had an observer corps for a long time. So we are standing on and building with lots of different organizations that have done this kind of work before. Think about Court Watch. Documenters got started in its current form in Chicago. And when it originally began, it started with an organization called Smart Chicago, a civic technology collaborative that started in 2011. And one of City Bureau's co-founders was working with Smart Chicago in a mentorship capacity. And the team there basically said, hey, we'd love for you to remix this idea, take what we've been doing with residents, taking notes at our conferences and meetings, and see if you can apply it to civic meetings, public meetings in your community. In Chicago, we're going to be up to 1,000 documenters trained in the last 7 years, a little bit later this year, which is super exciting. Hundreds and hundreds of local public meetings covered, and Detroit came next in 2018, followed by Cleveland in 2020, and the network has grown and grown and grown over these past several years.
And how does somebody become a member, a part of the Documenters Network?
Yeah, so organizations and communities that are interested in joining the network can reach out to us directly, network@citybureau.org, or fill out an intake form, a questionnaire about your community, about your organization that's on the City Bureau website. And I can drop that link in the chat, I think, for everybody.
Okay. And if anybody has any questions, I guess you would put something in the chat for Max. Now, Max, you had also mentioned that some of the documenters are building data sets. How is that working?
Yeah, so when residents, documenters start attending public meetings, they often come up with brilliant ideas that the newsrooms that they're a part of might not have thought up on their own. Often when documenters go to these meetings, they're curious. They are trying to understand how these local government bodies work or how budgets work, and will propose to the newsrooms that are, the host of the program to start some original projects. In Detroit, for example, residents had been going to these local Department of Transportation meetings and had been hearing that the bus times were improving, that everything was going great with transportation. And they said, we don't necessarily see this in our own experience living in our neighborhoods. What if we, as documenters, spread throughout the city, gathered data and information, and produced our own report, Documenters on the Bus, that could help the newsroom and their partners contribute to a more thorough and nuanced view of transit in the city of Detroit. Teams have also worked with their newsroom colleagues, teams of documenters on tracking ARPA funding within a city, and they've gathered information about court systems as well in a couple of our sites.
So with people that you mentioned 1,000 people have been trained in Chicago alone.
Yeah.
What do you think generates that interest? There obviously is widespread interest from community members, and what are you hearing from folks?
Yeah, people join documenters for a number of reasons. And we have a questionnaire that we send to everyone when they get started about, how they heard about it, why they're interested in getting involved. And it really ranges. Documenters range in age from high school all the way up to seniors. People who, are pursuing a career in journalism or might have at one point, people who journalism is a brand new skill set and love just being part of these local public meetings. Some people hear about it through friends or family. We've got a whole, nuclear family in Cleveland that all documents parents and children. And people see this work and the work of documenters across the network as a way to be able to practice their civic skills, to be engaged residents. And often, the thing that people care most about is where they live. They want to make sure that their fellow neighbors, friends, and family are equipped with all the information that they need to live fully engaged lives in their cities. And by going to these local public meetings, making sure that that information is getting to the people who need it most, it's a way to, get a little bit of cash on the side while also contributing to local news and information.
Yeah, and now you also mentioned something about newsletters. That wasn't something I was familiar with. What are the newsletters? Who produces them? Do they come from City Bureau? Or are they generated within the communities?
Yeah, so every local site has their own news products that they create. Newsletters are the most common format, usually over the course of email. And also, especially in communities and areas where broadband internet is less reliable, teams are starting to experiment with print newsletters and work with other print publications within their communities to share, highlight reels from all of the reporting that documenters have gone to throughout the course of a week. Um, Teams have also started to navigate SMS text messaging. Our colleagues, Outlier Media in Detroit, are some of the best in the world at mixing text messaging with journalism. What will happen is that as documenters are going to public meetings, they'll note all of the important decisions or votes that have been made, but also highlight opportunities for people to get involved down the line. What we hear a lot when documenters sites get started is that residents hate knowing about things after they've happened. They say, why didn't I know that this development was going up? Why didn't I hear that my school was being shipped? Like all of the things that, that can be a bother if there's gaps in local news and information. So when documenters newsletters come out, one of the first things that everyone will do is focus on a big chunk of that will be ways to get involved. What are opportunities for you, your neighbors, your friends and family to show up, learn a little bit about what's being planned, and have your voices be heard in the process?
Now, you just mentioned that there's a mix of text messaging. What is that about?
Yeah, so our colleagues and Outlier Media in Detroit have an SMS process that they use to text directly with Detroiters who have questions about the city. And the reporting staff at Outlier will take information from the reporting that documenters do and include it in text messages that go out to people in specific neighborhoods. So if there's something that you need to know or you're curious about with your water bill or about a vacant lot down the street or a house that is being demolished, the reporting staff is there to text with you directly and be able to answer questions that you have in the most direct way possible. It's kind of looking at news and journalism as something that lives outside of articles, outside of audio stories and outside of documentary films, for example, or video journalism, and being kind of the most direct person-to-person way of sharing information.
Okay, so I could see like for Buffalo's Fire, for example, we already have a text messaging system. So this will, yeah, we're learning as we go since we haven't officially even started yet, but we have somebody at a meeting right now, and this is something that we could just easily put into that text messaging system. Now, you had also talked about collaborative local media networks. What does that mean and how does that work? A lot of questions because you guys have a lot of moving parts here.
Sure. So a lot of this work, collaborative journalism, is inspired by the work of the Center for Cooperative Media at Montclair State University in New Jersey. They, for years and years, have been championing and gathering information and best practices for newsrooms that look at each other not as competitors, but as people who can bring complementary skills, resources, ideas to gnarly projects or gnarly issues that maybe one newsroom by themselves couldn't cover. And then the Solutions Journalism Network team for several years was investing in and launching new collaborative journalism networks in cities like Philadelphia, in Detroit, in Charlotte, North Carolina, Wichita, Kansas. And in all of these communities, multiple newsrooms come together, sometimes even with their local library system and other community organizations, and choose a topic, something that they want to be learning more about, something that they realize is a bigger issue than any one newsroom can tackle, and decide, we as a collaborative are going to be looking into housing throughout the course of the year. And, if you're a Spanish language radio station, it will be especially helpful to have your reporting available in this format. And if you're a print publication that comes out in the form of graphic journalism or zines, will help you produce information that is pulling from the same information, but redesigned for different audiences and different news consumption needs. And this is a movement that, alongside documenters, has really started taking off in the last several years, especially. And it's been really inspiring to see, folks who historically would have been competitors realizing that, there's much more going on in any of our communities than any one news outlet can cover, and that by teaming up, they can benefit all of the residents in an area better than by sending the same groups of teams to the same meetings or stories and trying to scoop each other in that way.
Yeah, a lot of, on one end, you have newsrooms that can collaborate with each other. And then, at the other, another tier of this is just thousands of, well, in the case of the documenters, thousands and thousands. How many people do you think you have, are involved all around the country? You mentioned just training 1,000 alone just in Chicago. And why is this becoming a movement? I guess that would be the proper term for it, is that it continues to grow. And what do you foresee as the growth rate of the documenters? Have you guys reached the cusp yet? Do you have much more grand plans for where the network is going?
Grand plans for sure. We are. I'm going to try to go through all those questions. Number one was just how many people have been trained, and I think that we are coming up to around almost 3,000 people over the network who have attended an orientation or a local training. They've gone collectively to more than 6,000 different assignments. And across the network, that is translated into more than $750,000 paid directly to documenters for that work. So super cool opportunities of putting money into the pockets of people contributing to journalism, training people who are interested in maybe pursuing a career in reporting. And then you were asking, what is it that gets people inspired to do this work, and why do they want to get involved? And I think a lot of that has to do with, rather than needing to necessarily rely on going to a 4-year, master's degree program or spending tens of thousands of dollars on journalism school to get paid to do something that contributes to your community locally, to work directly with reporters, to be a part of the news ecosystem in your area without needing to have a credential is a major attraction for a lot of documenters. There are, I think, more people who would love to do journalism and love to be part of that work, but who don't necessarily see a pathway for themselves to do it in traditional journalism education. Not that there's anything, not that there's that, not that. Let me rewind here. So, documenters are people who would not otherwise see a way for themselves to get involved in local news and local reporting, and by participating in the work locally are able to take that first step often and being part of the local media.
Okay, and then as far as grand plans,
Oh
where
yeah.
where are we going with the documenters?
Yeah, so since I started coming up to 3 years ago now, we've gone from 3 sites up to these 19 that we're in right now. And we have a grand vision over the course of the next, 20 or so years, that documenters will become part of the fabric of the way that we think about democracy and local news in all of our communities. We have a long list of cities that are looking to get started in documenters. And I would love for this to be something that, 10, 15 years from now, people think of in the same way that they think of libraries or post offices, something that's a utility and a service for everybody, and an opportunity to understand, get involved with, and learn about local government across the country. We have some really cool models right now where public funding in New Jersey, for example, is being invested in local news and local journalism. And rather than relying on a market system that is not designed to support news, especially in rural communities, looking at different ways that different types of revenue streams can go to supporting this essential local reporting.
Yeah, and just to kind of illustrate that point of rural newsrooms fitting into the documenters, how many rural newsrooms are part of documenters right now?
Yeah, so Buffalo's Fire will be officially the first rural-focused newsroom when you guys get started in a couple of weeks. We have several teams that are working with documenters in rural communities that have not yet joined the network in Portage County, Ohio, in Center County, Pennsylvania, and in a couple of towns in New Hampshire. We also have been working with a group in Southwest Louisiana in Calcasieu Parish, who have been training residents in that area as well. So we are really excited to learn more about what this looks like over the next couple of years, and to welcome more rural counties and communities into the network.
Yeah, and I'll just take a few minutes to talk about Buffalo's fire and why the documenters became something that we were interested in. So we're here in North Dakota, and we have a minority state population of American Indians, but we're in a situation where if we have community people who want to be, you know, interested in journalism, are very civic minded. And first of all, our tribal colleges here in North Dakota and across the country don't offer journalism programs. But like any community, we're very interested in what the city council is going to do regarding a name change for Custer State Park. So there are many, many instances that you had mentioned earlier where we find out something after the fact, like the City Park Commission put a 15-year moratorium on ever bringing up the issue of doing a name change of Custer Park again. And it's like, okay, this is news that people are very interested in. They want to have a say in whose names are represented locally. So just as yeah, just as an example of why the documenters works in a rural community. So we have no of 32 tribal colleges around the United States, there's only one that offers a communications program, and that's way down there in Haskell, um, in Kansas. So this will provide us an opportunity to have our local community members. Again, there's some right now before we even really officially launched our training in a week or two, that they're down there attending this meeting about a new riverfront property, and the organizers have made a opportunity for Indigenous people, Native Americans, to say what they would like about how they would like to participate in this land development. So here in Bismarck, North Dakota, where this is the ancestral homelands of the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara Nation. You know, my tribe is the Mandan, and before Bismarck became the capital of North Dakota, this the Missouri River and all the waterfront property around here, this was our capital city before. You know, we've been here for um, thousands of years, literally hundreds of years. I live about 5 miles from the Minokan village site, which was inhabited like in 1200 AD. So we really do have a vested interest in knowing how they're going to develop riverfront property here. And so I think we're excited to be a part of this opportunity and to tell these particular stories. Is there and cover the meetings? And is there anything else, Max, that you think people that you want to say about the documenters? And then I just want to remind our people that are our participants, you know, if you have any questions for Max, please drop them in the chat. We're happy to answer anything.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Jody. And I can't wait to learn with you guys over these next couple of months. I see a question. Someone just raised a hand in the chat.
Yeah.
Was that, I think that if you go to the Q&A section down at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to type a question in there directly. And while that question is being typed, I can just share that, oh, thanks, Susan. Hey, we got a longstanding documenter here.
Uh,
Yeah, no, it's we have a wonderful, wonderful network of people who are generous, curious, creative, love their communities, and really are down to share what they've learned with each other. So I think, I'm really excited and inspired every day to do this work. And I I'm there's so much more for us to learn too. So if any future watchers of this webinar or folks on the call right now would love to talk more, please reach out at any time.
yeah, and, Max, I'm just curious on, funding an organization that is growing as big as the documenters. What are what is the foundation approach? I mean, how do you raise money? This is just something that I'm curious about. How do you sustain an organization like the documenters? What do you rely on? What do you need?
Yeah, so each Documenter's site raises money locally to do the work. And we have seen teams budget for usually between 1 to 1.5, sometimes 2, depending on the size of the community. Full-time staff that are working directly with documenters, editing their notes, and then working to produce and curate the reporting that comes out of that. And then altogether, that can range on the low end from around 120 to $150,000 a year in budget, up to 200 to 250 in some of our bigger cities and communities, which, in some places looks like 1 or 2 full-time staff at a newsroom, and in other places is the entire budget of an organization. So I think what we recommend for teams that are interested in figuring out how to start this workout is start small. Focus on a couple of public meetings in your community that you think would be beneficial to have extra eyes and ears on. Start to train a couple, maybe 5 to 10 documenters to get started, so you have a little bit of a practice of what that looks like, and then build from there. We've seen that in addition to being able to produce more reporting that's valuable for residents, which makes it easier for people to feel, invested in your news organization, sign up as members, sign up as sustaining recurring donors or members. Civic journalism and civic engagement is in a lot of ways, for nonprofit newsrooms at least, can be easier to fundraise around than hiring reporters or doing specific reporting projects. And by highlighting how you as a news organization are contributing to workforce development, job training, and then as Susan mentioned in there, we also win grants like from the Democracy Fund and the Stronger Democracy Award, MacArthur Foundation, because we have great civic journalists. Exactly. We've got so many great examples for teams to learn from and pull from, and to be able to build in their own communities as well.
Okay. And then I can imagine with so many civic documenters, journalists, committing acts of journalism is something I've heard you
Yeah.
say before. I imagine that there's, a lot of news tips that come out of these meetings that are being covered. Can you think of any big stories that have come out of the documentary network or from civic journalists?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of the cool things about being part of a network. Teams that, might not know that something is off in their own community, when being in conversation with other reporters, learn that something might not be being done the way that it's supposed to. Here's a recent example from our colleagues in Fresno. After documenters in Chicago and Cleveland, Detroit, Minneapolis had been reporting from their local budget subcommittees, Fresno's team said, hey, wait a minute, why don't we have a local budget subcommittee? And it turned out that their city council had most likely been committing Brown Act violations, Open Meeting Act violations in their city. And their explanation was that, oh, this is an ad hoc committee. It's a temporary thing, and we don't need to host our meetings in the public. And the Fresno Land team said, I don't think that that's true, and we're going to sue you to make sure that that happens. So that's a great example of documenters going to public meetings, noticing a gap, and then being able to then act to make things work better. We also, here, I'm going to grab another example here. Documenters in Detroit were for years going to these local city council meetings, and we're hearing that, oh, and wait a minute, whoops. Let me just make sure. I might need to close this window here and then open up the chat again. We're asking for their city clerk to make meeting minutes and agendas from the city council available. And week after week after week, documenters would go to the office, ask for the meeting minutes, ask for the notes. And then finally, after reporting it out, the team was able to convince the local government officials to post this information online so that all residents, not just the documenters community, could access that information. We've also had just recently in San Diego, one of our first documenters assignments there noticed that the first meeting that they went to, there was an open meetings act violation. So, you know, these are things that are sometimes done, you know, let's see. Yeah, and here's another example from just this week about the City of San Diego's Citizen Advisory Board on Police Community Relations hadn't met for over a year, and the documenters had to go and find out what happened. So there are all sorts of things that happen in these local public meetings that unless a documenter is there to pay attention to it, nobody would know about. And that's why we do what we do. In addition to making sure that, you know, wonderful documenters and residents like Susan there in the chat, you know, can, you know, be involved and participate and influence and guide and steer and shape the reporting that happens.
So what type of, so you have your citizen journalists, your documenters. You had described this before, like it's the documenters are like a newsroom within a newsroom.
Documenters are residents. They are curious, creative people who contribute to the news and information that's available. So in a lot of ways, they act almost as sort of like a mixture between a community advisory board, a wire service. They're producing reporting. Every time a documenter goes to a local public meeting, they are committing an act of journalism, right? And that reporting and information that they produce then becomes the seed or a kernel of, you know, sometimes it's just a meeting brief. This is what this board or committee met to discover or decide, and here's why it matters to you as a resident. That's journalism, that's important, and that is what we hear over and over again as something that's missing in a lot of communities when people are looking to get documenters started. And then occasionally, and this is not the expectation, although we see it pretty regularly, there will be something that deserves some more reporting and some more follow-up. Tax-paying citizens interested in their community change. Exactly. Yeah, people who care about where they live and want to see their tax dollars spent in an effective, efficient way, in a transparent way, and see their work as documenters as contributing to that.
So you have this group of documenters, and then what is the interaction that they might have with that and with a newsroom then that has a full staff of reporters? Do the two in between meets at some place?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So every documenter's site hosts communities of practice, gatherings where documenters, reporting staff, both within the newsroom and at other partner newsrooms, come together to talk about what people have been learning. And these spaces are some of my favorite things about what happens in documenters. It's a way for people to build relationships with each other. And often those spaces are where the kernels of reporting ideas come up. They're places where mentorship relationships get started. And, documenters who are interested in pursuing a specific, topic interest, for example, documenters who care about the environment or about housing, about the criminal justice system or about education, have a chance to be able to learn from and work with reporters at the other newsrooms that they're a part of. And that, I'll grab an example from Detroit here in a second, but that's been a great way for documenters to bring ideas that they discover within meetings to a wider community.
Okay. All right. I know I had another question there at the tip of my tongue, but anything else, Max, that you want to
I'm just
address?
dropping this link here.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I've been sending it to host and panelists, and I can't send it to everybody on there, but
Oh,
for people who are attending, I think that the SPJ team will be able to share these links out afterwards, and we'll be able to share them online as well. And yeah, for the documenters who are in the house, you are loved and appreciated. We none of this happens without you. For interested reporters, get in touch with the documenter site within your community, and if there isn't one, reach out to us. We'd love to figure out a way to make it happen where you are as well.
yeah, that all sounds excellent, Max. And yeah, any other questions or anything participants might want to ask or add? So if we're kind of reached the I think we're heading towards the finish line here. All right. Okay, well, I think we can kind of wrap things up then and appreciate your time. And I'll probably have to text you with that other question that was I really did want an answer for, but I will get a hold of you, Max.
Okay. Thanks, Jody. Thanks, SPJ, and thanks everyone who is here on the call today. And yeah, this was a great conversation, and I'm so excited to see what we learned together in North Dakota.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it and we'll be able to report that out pretty soon. Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.